Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Wolfe. Thank you for joining me today. Today, we will be talking about national parks in the United States. And so I'm happy that you will be able to join me for this conversation. Last time I talked about fall recipes and we learned how to um, cook a couple of different dishes. But today, we'll talk about something different, something more uh, related to the United States. So, when we talk about the national parks today, we'll do a couple of things. First, I'll tell you a little bit about what national parks are, how many there are, some information about national parks, and then we'll actually learn about a few national parks and things that you can do and see there. So, let's take a look and learn more about national parks in the United States. So, let me pull up my screen and let's get started. All right. So, United States national parks. There are a lot of national parks in the United States. Before we talk about how many there are, you can see some pictures here of the different national parks. Really, they're very picturesque. We can take a lot of fantastic pictures of them. But let's learn a little bit more about national parks and some facts about them. So, some interesting things about national parks in the United States. So, the very first national park was created in 1872. So, just about 150 years ago, the very first national park was created. Now, there are a lot of national parks in the United States, and the service that protects these national parks is called the National Park Service. It's a part of the government, and it is their role to protect the land that is protected in national parks. And more than 340,000 square kilometers of land is protected by the National Park Service. That is a lot. That's very, very large. So there's a lot of space protected by national parks in the United States, and for very, very good reasons. One of those reasons is protecting endangered or threatened plants and animals. There are more than 400 endangered or threatened plant animal species that live in the national parks. So, some examples of endangered animals that you know about snow leopards that live here in Kyrgyzstan. These are endangered animals. There aren't very many of them left in the world, so it's very important that we protect them so that they can continue to be around and be a part of the ecosystem, the environment in the world. And so there are more than 400 animals and plant species that live in these national parks, which is also a lot. Also, national parks are a great place to walk around because they are usually in natural places, far from cities. There's a lot of trails to walk on, a lot of hiking trails. So, if you like to hike, if you like to go for long walks, there's more than 29,000 kilometers of trails to walk on, which is also a lot. That could take you a very long time to walk on every single trail, certainly a number of years. Uh, so there's a lot of amazing places to walk in the United States in these national parks. Okay, so I'm talking about how much land the national parks take up, but how many national parks are there? Well, take a moment, try to make a guess. You can write them in the comments if you want. You can say it in your head, but how many national parks do you think there are in the United States? If more than 340,000 square kilometers are protected by the National Park Service. That might be able to give you a bit of a guess. I'll give you a few more seconds if you want to make a guess. All right. So in the United States, there are 63 national parks. 63 national parks are protected by the United States government. And of course, we're not going to talk about all 63 of these parks today. That would take a very long time, and we simply do not have the time to talk about them all. But we will talk about a couple of them. One of them that we will talk about is Yellowstone National Park. This is one of the most popular national parks in the United States, so we will be talking about this one. We will also be talking about Yosemite National Park. So I'll go into detail about these two parks, and at the end, I'll also share with you a few more other popular national parks or some parks that I have visited. But these two, Yellowstone and Yosemite, are two of the most popular national parks in the United States, and they're certainly two of the most famous for very, very good reasons. So let's take a look at these two parks, starting with Yellowstone. Okay, Yellowstone National Park. Now, this park is actually found right here in the middle of, well, in the west of the United States. Most of it is in the state of Wyoming. Okay, but actually, parts of Yellowstone National Park also go into the state of Idaho and the state of Montana. So it's actually part of 3 states, technically, but it's also a very, very big national park. Okay. To give you an idea of just how big Yellowstone is so Kyrgyzstan is the size of this state here, Nebraska. That's about the size of Kyrgyzstan. And this is the size of Yellowstone. So you can imagine just how big that is. Yellowstone is about 2/3 the size of the Talas Oblast. 2/3 the size. Which is pretty big. I know Talas is the smallest region in Kyrgyzstan, but still, the fact that Yellowstone is 2/3 of its size gives you an idea of just how big it is as a national park. It's huge. So Yellowstone National Park it was the first national park in the United States. So remember when I said that the first national park was created in 1872? That was Yellowstone. So it was the first national park, and again, it's the largest national park, almost 9,000 square kilometers, or 2/3 the size of Talas. And in Yellowstone National Park, you can see a lot of different animals. In fact, there are 67 different species of mammals, just mammals. Okay, there are lots of other kinds of animals out there, like snakes, lizards, other amphibians, and reptiles. But there are 67 different species of mammals and more than 285 different species of birds. So lots of different animals live in Yellowstone. Yellowstone also has 290 waterfalls. So waterfalls, there's a lot of them in Kyrgyzstan, but just in Yellowstone alone, there's 290. A lot. A lot of waterfalls. And also in Yellowstone, you can find more than 10,000 hydrothermal features. We're going to talk about that in a moment to give you an idea of what I mean by hydrothermal. But there's more than 10,000 of them, which is very, very impressive because really to find so many in a concentrated space in the same space is fairly difficult. And of the 29,000 kilometers of hiking trails in national parks, in Yellowstone, we have about 1,610 kilometers of hiking trails. So a lot of places that you can go for a walk in Yellowstone National Park. All right. So I mentioned hydrothermal features. What are those? When we talk about hydrothermal, first of all, hydro is related to water, so liquid water. And thermal is related to the word warm. So warm water or hot water features. And so there are a few hydrothermal features that you can find. And here are 5 of the ones that are found in Yellowstone National Park. You can find hot springs, geysers, mud pots, taverting terraces, and fumaroles. Now, I'm going to go into more detail about hot springs and geysers. Probably you know what hot springs are. Kyrgyzstan has quite a few hot springs that people like to go to and relax in. But what I'm not going to go into too much detail with are mud pots and taverting terraces and fumaroles. However, I do have some pictures of them here so that you can get an idea of what they are. Here in the top left, we have taverting terraces. So you have these structures with a lot of hot water or warm water being held inside of them. These are taverting terraces, and there are other places that these can be found around the world. We have fumaroles, which are in the bottom left over here, which is basically an open area of the ground where you have steam coming out. So steam that just comes out of holes in the ground, and it's fairly misty like you see here. And then there's mud pots, which is literally boiling mud. You do not want to go into this, of course, because it would be quite hot. And you can see the bubbles forming because the mud is so hot that is actually boiling like water. And these are called mud pots. And these can all be found in Yellowstone National Park. Now, two of the things that I do want to go into more detail about are hot springs and geysers, because these are two of the most famous uh, things that you can see in Yellowstone National Park. So let's talk about Grand Prismatic Spring. This is the most famous hot spring that you can find in Yellowstone National Park, and you can imagine the reason why. Just by looking at the picture here, it's incredibly beautiful. Look at those colors; it's a, very rainbow-like. The blue colors, the green, the whole mixture of it all is really quite beautiful. It looks like a prism, which is where it gets its name, Grand Prismatic Spring. So this is a very, very large hot spring. And actually, it's the third largest hot spring in the world, and it can be found in Yellowstone National Park. And just to give you an idea of just how much water is coming out of this hot spring, more than 2,100 liters of water are spilling out, are discharged every minute. That's a lot of liters, of course, but it's not too hard to imagine because of just how large it is. And so 2,100 liters of water spilling out of this hot spring per minute. And also, you do not want to swim in this. Of course, there are some hot springs that people like to go in Kyrgyzstan, and they're very relaxing and they feel amazing. However, if you go into the Grand Prismatic Spring, you will be burned because it has a temperature of 70 degrees Celsius, way too hot. Do not go inside it. And so this is the Grand Prismatic Spring, one of the most popular sites that you can see in Yellowstone National Park. It's a hot spring and it's very, very beautiful, as we can all see. Another hydrothermal feature that we can see are geysers, which of course, a geyser is not the animal you see in front of you. Again, hydrothermal feature relates to water. It's the thing in the background, which is spurting out a bunch of steam. Okay, so this is called Old Faithful, and it is probably the most famous geyser in the United States and certainly in Yellowstone. And it erupts, or the water bursts out of Old Faithful every 60 to 90 minutes, so hour to hour and a half. It's very, very predictable, and hot water comes shooting out of the ground, kind of like you would imagine a volcano, but of course, it's not lava that's erupting out, it's hot water. And it gets its name, Old Faithful, because it's very predictable. You know when the water is going to come out. And so it's called Old Faithful because it's predictable. You can have faith that the water will come out at the time you predict. And of course, these are very high eruptions. They go up, they're anywhere between 32 to 56 meters high. And so remember that the Grand Prismatic Spring spills out about 2,100 liters per minute. Well, Old Faithful, every eruption is about 14,000 to 32,000 liters of hot water bursting out. And this is even hotter than Grand Prismatic Spring. The steam from Old Faithful is about 96 degrees Celsius. Very, very hot and spraying out of this hole in the ground. And this is called a geyser. This is a geyser. When water comes shooting out of the ground like this is a geyser. And again, Old Faithful is one of the most famous ones in the United States. All right. So I also want to talk more about the wildlife that you can see in Yellowstone National Park. That's also something that is very, very amazing to see. Now, if you remember, I said there were a lot of different mammals that you can find in Yellowstone National Park. I'm not going to go through all of them because that would be a lot. However, one of the beautiful things about national parks in the United States is that they protect the wildlife and they protect the nature, especially nature that is endangered and is threatened with extinction. And so Yellowstone especially has been very successful in protecting some of these animals and helping them come back and have a more healthy population and be less threatened. And an example of these are the Canada lynx, the gray wolf, and the grizzly bear. These are all endangered animals. And the gray wolf was actually in danger of almost completely disappeared from the United States because they were being hunted for a long time. Of course, farmers did not like them. They were constantly killing their livestock. But by creating this national park, the park was able to introduce the wolves kind of back into the United States and help them make a comeback so that they're not as endangered anymore. Of course, they still are endangered, but they're not as close to extinction as they once were. So the gray wolf was one that has been very successful in coming back into Yellowstone National Park, and of course, we can't forget the grizzly bear, which is the largest bear in the world. It's an enormous brown bear. You do not want to get anywhere near one of these guys. They're very dangerous, and don't let them fool you how big they are. They are fast and very strong. So a very terrifying bear, but also a very endangered bear, and one that is starting to come back. And finally, also the Canada lynx, one of my favorite animals. It's a wild cat, but it's a very large cat, and it has a very unusual face with its little ears. It also has a very short, stubby tail, unlike most cats. But it's a wild cat and a very large cat. But it's also one that is also very endangered and one that does very well. It's also very shy. Much like you can imagine snow leopards in Kyrgyzstan, you can imagine the Canada lynx. Does not like to be seen, does not like to be found, prefers to be off on its own. Some other animals that you can see that are not going to attack you are bison, elk, and moose. Now, these are some pretty amazing animals as well. I love the sight of these animals. They're also very big. The bison is an endangered animal as well. And the reason it is endangered is because it has been hunted so much. But it's this very large, you can imagine, it's like a large cow, but a very big cow with a hump on its back end. It's also terrifyingly fast. Again, like the grizzly bear, don't let it fool you by how big it is. It can run and it can actually jump. I've seen these things jump over fences before, which is pretty incredible for how big they are. So there's the American bison, which you can find in Yellowstone National Park, as well as the elk. And one of my all-time favorite animals is the moose, which you can see on the top right. This is a moose, and it is huge. They're usually larger. It's hard to see in this picture, but a moose is larger than a car, very much so. And it's not unusual, especially in Yellowstone, but in other parts of the U.S. where moose live. On roads, there are signs warning drivers to be careful and drive slowly and be on the lookout for moose, because if a driver hits a moose, yeah, the moose will be hurt, but it's very dangerous for the driver because the moose is so big that it will destroy the car, and it could very much hurt the people who are inside because they've hit something so big. It's like running into a tree. This animal is massive, but also very beautiful as well. And you can see all three of these animals, the American bison, the elk, and the moose, all in Yellowstone National Park. All right, so let's move on to the next national park. We've talked a decent amount about Yellowstone. I also want to talk about Yosemite. So Yellowstone was in this area here in the west, and Yosemite you can find in California. Now, I know you've all heard of California, most likely, and Yosemite National Park is there on the eastern edge of it. And Yosemite National Park was actually what gave birth to the idea of national parks. So we got the idea of creating national parks from Yosemite. And there are some very specific reasons why. It was not the first national park. Again, that was Yellowstone National Park, but Yosemite was the reason why national parks even existed, simply because it is so beautiful. Yosemite was the third national park in the United States. In Yosemite, you can find 400 different species of animals, and Yosemite also has one of the tallest waterfalls in the world, which is not it's not as famous as you hear like Angel Falls or Niagara Falls, but again, this is one of the tallest in the world, and so it is quite popular to see. A lot of tourists go to see it in Yosemite because it's one of the tallest and also very, very beautiful. Yosemite National Park is also very popular amongst rock climbers, people who like to climb rock walls. Love to go here to Yosemite for rock climbing. Some of the most challenging climbs can be found here in Yosemite. And so Yosemite is very, very famous for rock climbing. And I'll show you a few sites where people like to go rock climbing. All right, so let's talk about the greatest peaks. This is a picture of Yosemite National Park, and so you can imagine why it inspired national parks to be built. This is a very, very beautiful scene. You have this valley, which is surrounded by mountains on both sides, and within that valley are just some of the most beautiful sights that you can see. And you can imagine also being on top of some of these mountains, some of these peaks, and seeing the view from up there. We're seeing this from below. Now imagine if you were on top and what you could see. You can see a lot. You can see much of California just from here. All right, one of the most famous peaks is El Capitan, and you can see it here on the right. And it's this in the right picture, it's the mountain on the left. This is El Capitan, and it is 914 meters tall from the bottom of the valley to its very peak. And just to give you an idea of just how tall that is, we know Burj Khalifa is the tallest building in the world, and it's in Dubai, and it's 828 meters. Okay, well, El Capitan is no building, it's a mountain, so of course it's bigger, but it gives you just an idea of just how large of a drop there is from the very, very top of the mountain to the bottom. 914 meters. That is a very, very big fall. So you don't want to fall down that, of course. It is very, very big. And it gives you an idea if you've ever been to Dubai or if you've seen pictures of people looking up to the top of the Burj Khalifa, you can imagine what it would be like to look up El Capitan and just how large, how tall this mountain is. Now, the reason I mention El Capitan, not just because of its height, but also because of how much people love to climb it. Remember, I said Yosemite National Park is famous for rock climbing. People like to climb up this mountain, up the cliff. They use their hands and their feet and they pull themselves up. If this is a sport that you've heard about, this is also very difficult. People, of course, they will use ropes, but there are some very, very experienced rock climbers who go up in a free climb without ropes. And is considered to be one of the most challenging cliffs to climb in the world. And so travelers, rock climbers from around the world come to Yosemite to get that experience, to try to climb one of these, try to climb El Capitan. Of course, not just anybody can do it. It's very, very dangerous. You need to be a very experienced climber to actually do so and to even receive permission to do it. But El Capitan is a very, very famous rock climbing place because of its height and the challenge that it provides. Another famous peak is Half Dome. Maybe you saw it in the first picture of Yosemite National Park. It's this picture here, and it gets its name because it looks like a dome, so a curved top going down, but it's only half of it, right? So it's a curved dome, but it's been cut in half, so it's called Half Dome. And this is also, people like to climb it. You don't rock climb up this, but you can hike up it. And such a challenge to climb up that people need cables to climb up in. You can see the steps here and you can get a sense of how steep it is. You can't just walk up Half Dome. You have to pull yourself up using these cables simply because of how steep it is. But it is also a very popular mountain to climb because of its challenge and also the view that you can get. And you can kind of get an idea of what kind of view you're looking at. Um, in this picture on the right. This is Half Dome. Another famous mountain that people like to climb in Yosemite is Sentinel Dome. This is considered to have the best view of the national park, and you can get a view of it here. You can see the top, or you can see Yosemite National Park from above, and so it's a very, very beautiful view. It was also very famous for having a single tree, this one tree, growing at the very top. And of course, you can see it's been kind of warped. It's kind of misshapen, has an unusual shape to it because it's growing at the very, very top of a mountain. So it doesn't have good nutrients. It's on a rock. The wind is blowing at it, and so it's been completely misshapen to look like this. And it was very, very famous for this tree. Unfortunately, the tree has died and has fallen because of a drought. It was too dry and it couldn't get enough water. And so it sadly died. You can still see the tree up there. It's still lying there, but it's a dead tree lying on the ground. But it was very, very famous for this view for a long, long time. Now, Yosemite, as I said, was the first, it gave the idea of a national park, of having national parks because of how beautiful it is. And you can kind of get an idea of just how beautiful it is from these pictures here. You can see the view of Yosemite National Park here. You can also see the mountains in the distance. And of course, we're just looking at pictures, but if you were actually up there, the view that you could get just turning in a circle, you would get quite the amazing view. Now, Yosemite is also famous for waterfalls. As I said, it has one of the tallest waterfalls in the world, and that would be Yosemite Falls. It has a 739 meter drop from top to bottom, and it actually has 3 sections. It's a little hard to tell, though, because of how it falls. So you have Upper Yosemite Falls, which is this big drop here, and then there's the Middle Cascades, which falls again down here, and then the Lower Yosemite Falls, which falls all the way. So it's a very, very tall waterfall, and it's one of the tallest in the world, and definitely worth visiting. If you visit it at the right time of day, when the sun hits it, it looks as though it's on fire. It looks like it's glowing, which is a really impressive view, a really amazing view to see. So those were a couple of parks, some of the most famous parks: Yellowstone National Park, Yosemite National Parks. I do want to give you an idea of some other national parks that are in the United States, not just these 2. I wanted to present those 2 because they are the most popular. But I want to show you some others that I have visited. I did not take these pictures that we will be seeing next, but to give you an idea of what other beautiful national parks there are in the United States, I do want to show you a bit more. Because remember, there are 63 national parks in the United States, which is quite a lot. And we just can't go through all of them today. So one of them I have visited is Yosemite National Park. So we've already seen that. I have been there. I unfortunately have not been to Yellowstone yet, and I do hope that I will. But some national parks that are very much worth visiting in the United States are as follows. Bryce Canyon. And just by looking at this, you can see just how incredible this is. I've been here to Bryce Canyon before, and it's really amazing. You have this canyon with these fantastic little structures here all around the edge. And these are called hoodoos. And they're really very impressive. They're amazing to look at. And what's even more fun is going down into the canyon itself and walking throughout the hoodoos. So Bryce Canyon is definitely a place worth visiting if you ever find yourself visiting national parks in the United States. Another one that is very close to Bryce Canyon is Zion National Park. Zion is another canyon like Bryce Canyon, and it also has this incredible view, kind of like Yosemite. You can't climb up all of these mountains quite as well as you would in Yosemite. There are a few that you can climb up, uh, and you can get some really impressive views, such as this one here. Walking on this trail, you can look all along the canyon in Zion National Park. And this is also a very, very incredible view. Um, One that we aren't going to actually show today, but is worth visiting, is the Grand Canyon. It's probably one of the more famous ones. So you have Bryce Canyon nearby, then Zion, and then after that you have Grand Canyon. So many people will go and visit all of them at once: Bryce Canyon, Zion, and the Grand Canyon. Another one that is amazing to visit and doesn't have so many rock features like we've seen in Yosemite, Bryce Canyon, and Zion. This is the Smoky Mountains. So here you have mountains, and they're not very tall mountains, certainly nothing like the mountains that we have here in Kyrgyzstan, which are very, very tall. Smoky Mountains are definitely lower, but they're covered in trees, and these trees can have very beautiful colors to them, especially in the fall. You can have the yellow, orange, red, green colors all mixing together, which is incredible. One thing to know about the Smoky Mountains National Park is that it is the most visited national park in the United States. It gets more visitors per year than any other national park. It's not as well known around the world as the Grand Canyon or Yellowstone or Yosemite, but in the United States, more people visit the Smoky Mountains than any other national park because it's simply beautiful, and it's a great place to go camping. You can set up a tent, relax outside, and stay the weekends in the mountains here. And it's a really wonderful place to visit. Another one that's worth visiting is Acadia National Park in Maine. This one is by the ocean. So all the ones that I've shown so far have been in the middle of the United States, landlocked, but Acadia is actually by the sea, and it's all the way up in the northeast in the state of Maine, and you can get this really beautiful view along the coastline, along the ocean, where you have these cliffs and rocky faces with a forest nearby. And Acadia is really a fantastic place to visit too, one that I'm very glad that I've had a chance to visit. A very famous national park also in the state of California is Sequoia National Park. And if you're looking at this picture, you're probably wondering, how are these trees so big? That's a very good question. These are the largest trees in the world, sequoia trees, and they can be found in Sequoia National Park. They are an endangered tree. There are not very many of them. They're very, very wide, and we do have this person down here at the bottom to give us an idea of just how big these trees are. They're very wide and extremely tall. So some of the tallest and widest trees in the world are the sequoias, and these sequoias are protected in Sequoia National Park, so they can only be found really in California. Nearby Sequoia National Park, we also have Kings Canyon, another canyon with some really fun climbs, some really fun hiking that can be done along the mountains and into the canyon itself. This is one that I've been in, Kings Canyon. If you're visiting Sequoia, you go to Kings Canyon too. They're right next to each other, and people usually visit them together. It's a very amazing place to go for a walk. And the last one I'm going to talk about, this one is very unusual, the Gateway Arch. You're probably looking at this and thinking, why are you showing us a city? This is not a national park. This is not nature. And you're right, it's not nature like the rest of the parks. The Gateway Arch is actually, you can find it in a city in St. Louis, Missouri, in the very middle of the United States. So unlike most national parks, which are in nature, the Gateway Arch is in a city, and it's on the Mississippi River. So very wide river in the United States, very big and well-known river. And the Gateway Arch was built for the World's Fair. I don't remember which year it was, but it was built for the World's Fair in St. Louis many, many years ago. And you can actually climb, you can go into that arch. They have an elevator that will bring you all the way up to the top, and you get this pretty amazing view of things nearby. But this is a very special arch, which kind of marks where people began moving west when the United States first became a country. Many people were leaving from this area, and they began moving west into Colorado, California, these areas, which eventually became part of the United States. And so the Gateway Arch it's supposed to look like a gate that you walk through and go west. And this is another national park that is also protected in the United States by the National Park Service. So, with all of that done, these are some national parks that can be found in the United States. I hope that you have enjoyed learning about some of them. And now we have some comments coming in for all of you watching. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions at this time, this is your chance to write them into the chat, and I would be happy to answer them for you. Any questions you have about national parks in the United States. I see Igul saying that geysers are awesome. They absolutely are. I really do hope that I can visit them someday because they look cool. We have Marimai asking, how many of them have I been to already? I have been to 8 national parks. So there were the 7 that I presented at the end and Yosemite. Also asking, do people need to pay to enter Yellowstone National Park? Yes, any national parks, there is an entrance fee. The reason for this is because that money is used to further protect national parks. So the entrance fee is very important to continue protecting the wildlife and the nature in these areas. Let's see. Can you please tell us about Yellowstone Park as a huge crater or volcano is progressing to be more dangerous? I do not know about that. I would need to look that up. Unfortunately, I do not have this information about a volcano in Yellowstone. Ooh. Yeah, I think there is a volcano in Yellowstone, but I do not know what it is. And of course, like any volcanoes, yes, they are quite dangerous. What is the difference between the protection regime in national parks and nature reserves? That is another very good question. Let's see if I can answer that for you. Unfortunately, I do not know the difference between them, how they are protected differently. Some of these parks, so we have national parks, nature reserves, which have, they have different names. If I had to guess, nature parks are places where people are allowed to visit and they're allowed to walk around and see, versus nature reserves, which are meant for just nature, protecting the wildlife, and people are not allowed to visit. But again, this is my guess. I'm not entirely sure. But you can view it as parks versus reserves. Parks are for people to walk in and enjoy their time. Reserves are for saving. And thank you for watching, Gulzar. All right. It seems, unless we have any other questions at this time, we may be at an end. I'll give you just a few more seconds to ask any other questions if you may have any. All right. So I think then at this time, we will call an end to this presentation. So thank you everyone for watching. And I hope that you learned a lot about national parks in the United States. And I really hope that you have the chance to visit. And I also hope that you visit some of the other natural places here in Kyrgyzstan, because there are some very, very beautiful places here, and they definitely should be appreciated. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Have an amazing day and an amazing week. Bye.